Hi there. Okay, so we are going to be looking at RMXP's event commands today. This is a follow-up to the basic tutorial previously, so if you didn't watch that one, consider watching that one. So event commands, what are they? I've already gone over this window in the other video, so we're going to look at the details here. Because they're really what makes stuff do things. It's important for stuff to do things. So you can double click here, or press space or enter or whatever. Enter. Space is at it. To bring up this window, which has multiple pages of your commands. So I'm just going to go down these. Here I go forgetting words already. Piece by piece, and give a little explanation on what they are so that hopefully newcomers to RMXP don't feel completely lost when they're staring at like, oh my god, what is a button input processing? Or what does, okay, most of those are fairly self-explanatory, but what does transparency flag do, or whatever. Yeah, change transparent flag. There. I knew I saw it somewhere. Anyway, so let's just start here. Show text. You're gonna think I'm crazy, but this shows text. It displays your basic, bread and butter message box. So that's, as I'm going through these, I'm going to differentiate between Pokemon Essentials games and traditional RPGs. And by traditional RPGs, I pretty much mean everything else, even if it's not really a traditional RPG. Most of these commands will not be as heavily modified for most games as they are for Essentials. So I'm just going to point out differences that way. So anyway, basic message box. Not too much to say about that, except for this is what's modified by this change text options down here. So this, chooses what part of the screen you display it at, and this you could display text without a window, for instance, with the text options. And when you use this text options command, it's good until you use it again. So that means for all messages onward. So if you just want to do it for one message, make sure you set these things back to what they were before. So that's show text and change text. Show choices is and they say, do you want to do this? Yes or no? Or this is what's used for simple menu and elevator systems, for instance. The cancel stuff is if you try and hit the quote-unquote B button when you're doing this. So disallow means that if you hit B, nothing happens. You can't back out of this choice. Otherwise, you can choose to default to one of these options. Usually you might want to default to no, since that's generally what B button means in games. Branch means that, well, here, let me make an example here. So when you use this show choices command, you see you get a handler for each option. So this is what happens when you say yes. This is what happens when you say no. And then when you choose the branch option, you get a field for cancel, or what to do when somebody backs out of the choice. So you actually have a good deal of control with your choices here. It's almost everything you need. The only thing is if you need more than 4 choices, then what you need to end up doing is nesting your choice things, so you can use more, and then when you go to more, it's a second choice command, so you can display 3 or 4 more things. This is done for the move tutors in Reborn. If you want to go back with your 4th option here, so let's say back or previous to the first set of choices, what you would want to do is use a command called a label, which I will get to. I might as well just explain it now. Basically, labels set a bookmark in your event processing. So we set our label 1 up here. At first, nothing happens. But then if you get to a point in the code where it says jump to label 1, that means the processing is going to go back up here. So in this case, whoops, this should be under the previous section. In this case, so when you're on the second set of show choices and you choose previous, it jumps back up here and displays this first option again. It's pretty useful when making menus. I hear that in normal scripting that gets sort of messy, but it's really nice here. You can name them whatever you want in RMXP. I'm just used to calling them by numbers because I believe they were identified only by numbers in RPG Maker 2003. Anyway, that's show choices and labels. You can have as many different labels as you want, I think, as long as they're named differently. But they're only good for that single event and single page. So show choices input number. This allows the player to, pick a number and plug it into a variable. So this is used in Reborn, for instance, on Florinia's quizzes, like, what level does Starmie learn Rapid Spin? The player is going to put in 0 or whatever, and that 0 is going to be saved in the variable that they choose, and that can be used in a condition later, which is coming up. So, but that's useful for quizzes. I mean, that's usually what I've always used it for, but Lord knows what else you could do it for. Or maybe even just like a custom shop system if you want to enter quantity, like of how much you're buying or selling. Alright, anyway, change text options, moving over to button input processing. So this again will save the value of the button you press in a variable that you choose. So you could make a variable like input, and you would want to make sure, I'm jumping ahead here, you'd want to make sure to clear that variable before using this command. So you're going to use this command, and it's then accepting input from the player. It'll save the value of the input. I forget which button corresponds to which value. It's pretty easy to look up. I'll see if I can find it and put it in the description for you guys. But basically, like, say that spacebar is number 1. So if you want to check if the player pressed spacebar, you would then make a conditional branch, which I'll explain more about this in a moment, and say, is variable input equal to 1 or whatever? If so, then do stuff. This will commonly be used within a loop, which I'll explain later, but that's basically how you get an event to detect a button input. It's not always as reliable in RPG Maker as I would like it to be. Just put that out there. In that sometimes the timing is off. This is partly because of when you're making a loop for it. RPG Maker 2003 is actually a little bit better in this case because it had an option within the button input processing command that it would not do anything until a button was pressed, which made it no longer necessary to have a loop. But let's talk about loops, because that's down here. So let me clear the rest of this. So a loop basically means if you're in a loop, it's going to repeat that section of code over and over and over endlessly. So let's say we're displaying a message. God forbid. Just a normal message, but since it's in a loop command, it'll display infinitely until we use a break loop command, which will, exactly as you would expect, break the loop. Now that in its own is not very useful because it breaks the loop automatically, but when you use it with a conditional branch, for instance, say you have your input is equal to 1, doesn't need to be else, and then you only break the loop in that branch, then what you've done, assuming you have a button command here, is that you've created a loop without the message that will not progress until the player presses button 1. So that's how you can wait for an input. It's a little more complicated than RPG Maker 2003, but it still works. Now here's where it gets problematic, because RPG Maker, and most programs in fact, do not like infinite loops. An infinite loop is when you have a loop that never breaks. So we obviously have a break loop command in our code here, but if we were to run the game like this, it would freeze. And here's why. Because computer stuff, including RPG Maker, despite all its lagging sometimes, processes stuff really, really fast. So while it's waiting for the player to press a button, it's gone through this loop like some 5,000 times or something. Call it Hamura Akemi. But it's done that all in the blink of an eye before a person can even press this button, and so the computer can't keep up with all those looping, and it freezes. So in order to fix this, generally what you will do is you will add a wait command. A wait command basically tells the event to just pause for this many frames. So 20 frames in RPG Maker is 1 second. Because RM generally runs on 20 FPS. So if you tell it to wait 20 frames, that means the event processing is just going to pause for 1 second. In a case like this, you would probably want to do 1 frame, because that's the lowest time you can have a wait. So now it's no longer doing this loop infinity times in half a second, because each loop has to wait for 1/20th of a second. Now it's doing this loop 20 times per 1 second, and the computer is certainly able to keep up with that. Put a little asterisk there because I'm coming back to that. Now, this wait command thing within a loop for a button processing is difficult because you're now only checking for that button input 1/20th of a second. So normally that's fine. Like, you're not going to press a button so lightly that it doesn't get picked up in that time. But where this asterisk comes in is, say we're doing this in even a parallel event. I was going to go to comma event because it applies there too. But say you're doing this in a parallel event. Now you have this loop that's checking for something every 1 second. Or sorry, every 20 times per second. While a computer can keep up with that on its own, if you have multiple of these, or if you're doing like a bunch of other stuff on top of this, this can contribute to lag. But again, that's mostly when it's a parallel thing. So that is, let's see, where are we? Wait commands, input processing, loops, then, okay, conditional branches are very important. So, conditional branches in RPG Maker are the if, else, then statements of, any basic code, which if you are familiar with code logic, you can probably already presume what this does. So, you get a bunch of settings here, a few pages like the normal event command menu. And basically what you're doing is you're saying, if this condition is true, let me put one in, then you'll process this branch. This is true. If this condition is not true, else, then you process this branch when it's false. That's bread and butter of coding, really. But it's, pretty important in inventing too. So let's go over these command triggers. They're very similar. These first few are very similar to the event conditions I went over here because they are all just conditionals. So you can do if a switch is on or off, the variable is, equal to, less than, etc. Either a single number, so like variable is less than 5, or you can choose this and say if variable 1 is equal to variable 2. That can be really useful in a lot of situations that I can't think of an example of right now, but trust me on that. Self switch, same as switch up here. I went over this in the other video, but self switch only applies to the singular event. Timer, so you could do a countdown or maybe a race type of thing that way. You know, if your time is more than this, then, or less than this, you get a certain reward, or more than this, you get punished. Second page, actor is in the party. This is mostly for traditional, or not traditional, but default battle systems. Name applied. This seems weird, but it's actually really useful, and I will get back to why this is useful later. Blah blah, you have a skill, you have a weapon, you're wearing armor, you are inflicted with poison or something, status like that. None of this applies except for this, I think, theoretically, maybe. Again, I'll get back to this caveat later. But most of this will not apply to Pokemon Essentials. This is the same thing if an enemy is doing something, or poisoned or something, mute, whatever that is. We know what mute is. Anyway, again, that's the default battle system. Character is facing a direction. Very useful for any type of game, especially if you have an event where, like, it needs to move you around, but you can talk to that event from different sides. So you can say, if you're talking to this event from the left side, your character is facing right, so you can change your movement pattern based on that, so you don't crash into or walk through anything, which is generally nice. Page 4, gold. This does work in Pokemon Essentials. It's your money count, but item, weapon, armor is all for traditional RPGs. That does not work in Essentials. Button down is being pressed, so this is a workaround to the button input processing thing from before. I guess what I showed you before is another alternative for if this doesn't work for some reason. Also better for multiple input, but anyway. So that's an option. It's also with pressing, not with touching, so that's good to know. The former setup that I showed you for the button input processing with the loops would be for if you just want like a touch, whereas this is if being pressed. I don't know. I feel like I've lost myself here because I haven't used this extensively in RMXP. I haven't really done the button input processing thing since 2003. Not the year, the program. So, I don't know. It's an option to play with. Both of them are things to work with. Script, very useful in any situation. You can say, you know, if this goes into Ruby, but game variables 01 is equal to 1. That's just Ruby code for, you know, doing this. That's the same thing, but you can use a script to do it, or, you know, use any other variable, which is really nice. Then finally this check down here, this turns on or off the else statement. Sometimes you don't want an else statement. And it doesn't really make a difference if you have a blank one, but it's tidier if you aren't going to use it, you can just put it away so the code looks neater. So that's conditional branches. Learn to love them. They are your best friends. We've been through that. Alright, so I'm not sure how I'm doing for time, but you know what? I don't care. Exit event processing is basically going to say, this event needs to stop what it's doing right now. And it will. The difference between that and the next thing, a race event, is a race event will destroy this event until the map is refreshed. So like until you leave the map and come back, for instance. Exit event processing will just close the event. So like say you're talking to a shopkeep and you decide you don't want to buy anything. Well, you can use that to close the shopkeeper event without killing him. If you use a race event, you would kill him. But a race event is better for a scenario like cut trees in Pokemon Essentials games, where you cut the tree and you don't want it coming back until you've, you know, left the area. Call common event. I believe I went briefly over common events in the other video, but this is the ideal way to trigger them. Like, friendly advice, use common events a lot. Like, just treat them as what it says in the name. If you have a Pokemon Center event, for instance, that you're copy pasting everywhere, use a common event. That way when you change something in that place, you don't have to go and change every individual event in every single goddamn Pokemon Center. You can just change the common event, and everything with this command that points to it will update automatically. Labels, we've been over. Switches, I think I've talked about them a little already, but basically this is the Boolean variable of RPG Maker. It's either true or false. That is my phone dinging at me. My fan is probably really obnoxious. So you can turn a switch on or off and use that for conditionals or for event conditions. Or you can turn a group of switches on or off, which can be convenient, I guess, if you're doing a bunch of stuff, like maybe with resetting a game or setting stuff up at the beginning of a game, who knows. I honestly have not used the batch switch thing, but it's there. Variable, again, you know, you set a variable equal to a number, has to be a number, cannot do variable strings. Batch commands are there. RMXP does not have a lot of the recursive options that I liked in 2K3's variable system, which kind of pigeonholes you into using Ruby scripting for more complex systems, but that's a side gripe. So, your operations here. This means you set the variable equal to this number. This means you add this number to the variable current total, subtract from the current total, multiply by this number, divide by this number. And this mod thing is actually modulus. And if you do not know, modulus is when you divide something by a number and return the remainder. So say you have 23 and you're getting the modulus of 2. So you're going to divide 23 by 2. Obviously that's 2, and the remainder is 3, so a modulus of 23 by 2 will return 3. You might feel like this is weird, but it's very useful in making custom menu systems. Because say you have, I don't know, you have 10 options per page of items or whatever. And so you want to know how many item slots to load up on the last page. So if you have 23 items, you can say modulus of the item total, and you get that remainder, so you know to display 3 item slots instead of the full 10. Hopefully that makes sense. But honestly, if you are just now learning the basics of RPG Maker, you might not want to get into custom menu systems. So just keep that in mind. The numbers down here, again, constant, set it to a certain number, set it to the value of another variable. This is really nice. Set it to a random number between this and this. Set it to, I believe this is the quantity of how many items you have in this inventory. Actors, stat, enemies, stat. This won't matter for Pokemon Essentials. Characters, map X, map Y. This is invaluable. Invaluable for puzzles and such like that. Direction is a more convoluted way of doing the player facing, like was in the conditional events. So I believe it's something like up is value 2, right is value 4, left is value 6, and down is 8. I believe it matches whatever the care set is. Hold on a sec. Come back. So yeah, okay. So it should be 2, left is 4, right is 6. Fuck it, I don't even know. I don't want to give you guys wrong information, but I'm pretty sure it's something like that. Anyway, you basically have no reason to use that because you have the same option in a simpler form in the conditional branch. But the thing is, you'll notice it's going by 2, 4, 6, 8. Which we appreciate. That's because it's set up for an 8-directional system where you could actually be facing, northeast or southwest or whatever. That's obviously not included with RMXP by default, so that's kind of interesting that it works like that, but just keep that in mind should you ever choose to use that for some reason. Terrain tag is the tag that's set up from the database, so like if you're standing on a grass tile, you can figure that out using this. Screen X. So I believe this is the relative X and Y coordinate of the player across the screen, because only so many tiles can display on the screen at once. So whereas the map X and Y is like the absolute position of where the event is, this is the relative one. I have not needed to use this very much, but it's there if you need to. You can use this to reference any event. Other map ID is nice, I guess. Party members, I believe is the number of party members you have. Set equal to how much gold you have, how many steps you've taken, how long you're playing. This is all stuff for like custom menu systems. Timer, save count, yeah. So that's pretty much that. That's not what I intend to hit. Self switch, same thing as switches. I believe I went over this before. You can modify the self switches for an event's internal conditionals. Control timer. There used to be an option in 2K3 to display this on the screen, but I'm not sure if that's default because I haven't used this. But anyway, this is your this is your timer control, like was referenced by the conditional branch and such here, so you could use that. Change gold, add money, decrease money by a single amount or a number gotten from a variable, which is cool. Change items. This is not for Pokemon Essentials games, so a few of these commands will be only for traditional RPGs. This item stuff will not affect Essentials at all, but again, same idea. Add a certain item, increase or decrease it, either by a certain number or a number gotten from the variable. Weapon, same deal as item, still doesn't apply to Pokemon obviously. Same as weapon. Party member, again, only generally applies to the default battle system. Fairly explanatory. I am going through a lot more time than I would like, so I'll probably finish out this page and do a part 2. Windowskin is what your window looks like. Not entirely sure if this works in Essentials or not, but I don't know why it wouldn't. But yeah, you can use that for, custom menu options changing. Battle BGM. This will only apply for the default battle system, but you can change it here. You would want to do that, for instance, before a, special encounter or something. Battle enemy, victory music, for instance. You can change that to a different one for a battle. Change it back, obviously. Turn off or turn on save access. Again, this doesn't apply to Pokemon Essentials. Menu access probably does not apply. I mean, I assume it doesn't actually. I haven't tried to use this, but there are a lot of commands I noticed when I was playing with Essentials that just did not work when they should have in traditional RPGs. So I would be skeptical about this, especially since you don't generally have access to this. Or you would never not have access to this in a main series Pokemon game. So anyway, yeah, you can turn off their ability to save, to access the menu, you can turn off encounters if you're using the default battle system. And that's page 1. So I'll split this into a part 2, and stay tuned.